Hi, I'm Catherine.
And I'm Gail, and we welcome you to Women Over 70 Aging Reimagined, our weekly podcast. Our signature is sharing stories of vital women 70 to 100 plus who shatter the myth that women become irrelevant as we age. We appreciate your support. We'd love for you to join the Aging Reimagined Circle at womenover70.com or promote your book in Books by Women and invite us to speak to your organization.
And today we are delighted to be talking with Betty Grebenschikoff, who is 92 and a half years old. Now, rarely in life do we hear a story of horrific, long-lasting hardship that has a miraculously good ending. And Betty survived the horrors of the Holocaust, and she experienced an abrupt separation from her beloved childhood friend in 1939, only to be reunited after 82 years. So Betty now resides in Florida, and Ana Maria is in Chile. And they're among the few older people who can still remember and talk about the terrible things that happened during the Holocaust. Betty and her family escaped to China when they were there known as the Shanghai Jews. There she met and married her Russian husband, Oleg, in 1948. 2 years later, they fled to Australia during the onset of the Chinese Communist Revolution and moved 3 years later to the United States. In 1992, Betty published her memoir, Once My Name Was Sarah, and she's the mother of 5 children, 4 of whom are living, grandmother of 7, great-grandmother of 6, and she enjoys an active life in Florida with family and friends, along with weekly Zoom visits with Ana Maria. So Betty, welcome. We are just so happy to have you as a guest in Women Over 70.
Yes, we are. Yes.
Now, you and Ana Maria found each other after 82 years because I think each of you in your respective places in the United States and in Chile were speaking out about your experiences during the Holocaust. So tell us how you came together and how your friendship was rekindled.
Mm-hmm.
Well, every time I give a talk, and this has been going on for quite a long time, that I give lectures about my life and the Holocaust, I always mentioned my childhood friend. Her name used to be Ana Marie. It is now Ana Maria Wahrenberg. I always mentioned that I lost her when I was 9 years old. I have never heard from her again. And I wish that somebody would find her. Nothing happened for 82 years. And then the Shoah Foundation has a wonderful researcher there, one of many. Her name is Ita Gordon, it's really her story. She is the one who listened to a broadcast out of Chile in Spanish. And she listened to this lady talk about her childhood in Berlin and going to Santiago. And this lady also talked about the life we led, and Ana Maria did. And Ita Gordon listened to this, and she thought there was something vaguely familiar in that story. She might have heard this before. Now, in 1997, I gave testimony to the Shoah Foundation, which was founded by Steven Spielberg. I gave testimony about my life, and I talked about Ana Maria then. And I said, who she was and that I had lost her. And so this woman somehow took her time, this researcher, and she looked up the files, and she took quite a long time. And then suddenly one day she said, I think I found something. And she was so excited, she didn't know what to do with it. And eventually it came about that she talked to the different museums, the one in Chile and my museum here in Florida, and my children, and they thought maybe we shouldn't spring it on these 2 ladies that we found them because they're so old, they may not live through this, but we did. they told us, and we had a Zoom meeting with our families and the 2 of us, and it was a miracle, a total miracle. So again, this lady deserves all the credit for having found us, because Ana Maria never gave testimony to the Shoah. And I don't think she mentioned my name in her talks. which is what I always did.
Mm.
But it was just a chance that it happened, and it's absolutely incredibly wonderful. It's like the end of the rainbow for both of us.
Wow. Betty, what can you tell us what the Shoah Foundation is?
The Shoah Foundation was founded by Steven Spielberg after he read the book Schindler's List.
Mm-hmm.
And he wanted to get all the information of the surviving Holocaust survivors that he could get. So they send people out all over the world, in America and all over, to take our testimonies. And I did that one whole day with somebody. And they put this all together, and they called it the Shoah Foundation. Now, Shoah, of course, means the Holocaust. And they have thousands upon thousands of testimonies there. And in order to dig through all that, this researcher really did a marvelous job. And we have, both Anna Maria and I have become very good friends with her. She's just a wonderful person. Wonderful. Her name is Ita Gordon, and she deserves all the credit.
It's a remarkable story. I'm just, you couldn't make this up. It's just so wonderful.
Absolutely, you couldn't make it up.
So you have been speaking about the Holocaust in so many different, venues and forums. You wrote your book. You've been featured in documentaries. You talk to schools and colleges, museums, organizations. I think you're part of the International Diplomatic Corps of Florida. So I'll ask the very obvious question. Why is it so important for you to be telling these stories?
It's important, particularly today, as time goes on, and there are very few of us survivors left who can talk about the Holocaust and what happened in those days, and the fact that that people will forget. There were 6 million Jews who were killed. They were not just numbers. I can't even think of 6 million. I think of my family that was murdered. They're my extended family, particularly my cousin Peter that I love, who was my age and who never got old enough to have his bar mitzvah when he was 13. These people have to be remembered. Not only the 6 million people that we know about, but there were other millions of people who were helpers to the Jewish people, who took them in when they needed it, who hid them, and people, nuns and churches who took them in, and people who didn't even have anything to do with the Holocaust, but the Nazis didn't like them and they thought they weren't good enough to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so those are several more million people. And these people need to be remembered. These people had names. They were human beings. They were not just a number. Well, 6 million Jews got murdered. Okay, 6 million. What's 6 million? It's very difficult to understand that. I still don't understand it. So how can anybody else?
And the people who survived, like yourself and Anna Maria, then I assume you've been affected by this your entire life. And I'm wondering, you talk about it certainly in your book, and I'll just show it again. But it's such a moving and rich account of your life during that time. And so I'm thinking about was there anything you'd really like to highlight about your time in China? I think you lived there for 11 years with your family in a one-room place. What stands out for you from those years? Well,
one thing stands out for me, that I was very fortunate. Number one, that we were fortunate to be able to get to China, because contrary to what a lot of people think, you didn't need a visa to get there. You just had to be able to get yourself out of Germany, as I wrote in the book. Have enough money to bribe people, which my father did, so we could get out. And it stands out to me that I was very fortunate that my sister and I were taken care of by my parents, because people who didn't have enough money to bribe the authorities to get themselves out, or in any way at all, and people who didn't have a family to help them get through that. I was just a little girl. I was 9 years old. I didn't understand what was going on. Just I was 11. Her name was Edith. And she and I just thought we were on a pleasure cruise on the ship, because We had good cabins, and the life was good. We played. My mother cried all the time. My father was very anxious. But all these mixed messages were coming through all the time. But we were kids, and children adapt. And as long as you're with your family, you think it's going to be okay because your father said, "Oh, it'll be fine. Don't worry about anything. We'll take care of it." So that was it. And the other thing that stands out of my time in China is the fact that the Chinese people were very kind to us. We landed in a very poor section of Shanghai, which was then called Hongqiu, and it's kind of on the wrong side of the river, and it was full of very poor Chinese. Now, they were poorer than we were when we got there because we didn't have any money left either, but they had nothing. And yet they never called us dirty Jews. They never threw stones at us like they did in Germany. They never said, "What are you doing on our territory?" They were just kind to us. We didn't make lifelong friendships, but they were very kind to us. And they accepted us. And that was the whole thing. In contrast to the Japanese who took over after Pearl Harbor, who were pretty nasty and terrible to the Chinese. But I have a very strong feeling for the Chinese people because they were welcoming to us.
And I didn't know that until I read your memoir. I did
Mhm.
not know that China was open.
It was open for a while. It wasn't open after maybe a half a year or so later, after we got there. Then they closed that up because there were too many of us. It
Mhm.
wasn't only that the Chinese were good to us, they couldn't really do much for us. They just didn't push us around. But we had welcoming committees there, and we had places where people could live, very bad places to live. Fortunately, we didn't have to do that because someone rented us a room. But the life was very hard over there. It was.
How did your family make a living then while you were there?
Well, we got there with practically no money left, and we had lost all our things on the way anyway, so we didn't have that much with us. My father and my mother spoke a little bit of English, and English was the language for foreigners then. And my father found himself a job as a bookkeeper in a Chinese company. And he was very good about things. He was good with figures and adapting himself to different things. And then he got into chemicals. They had not a clue what a chemical was, but he studied every single night, and he somehow or other he did it. And so we had enough income to just barely make it, to pay the rent and to eat. I was never hungry. We didn't have any luxuries, but I don't remember being hungry. And we didn't have to take the food from the organizations because there were many other refugees. We were all refugees by then who were in worse shape than we were.
And then you had to leave China because of the Communist Revolution, I understand.
That was not until 11 years later.
It's 11 years later.
And
there you're off again. Go ahead, Gail.
Yeah,
Yeah.
while you were in China, were you able to go to school?
Yeah, we were able to go to school, but we only spoke German in school in Germany, and we didn't have any English, maybe 2 or 3 words. And so we went to school the school and the language for foreigners in Shanghai was English. And we went to an English school because that's what foreign children did. Nobody went to Chinese schools. They also had German and French schools, but we wouldn't go to German school, and we didn't speak French either. So we went to this school that was built by Sir Horace Kaduri, who is quite well known in those circles. And he built a school for the refugee children. And in comes a teacher who only speaks English. And she's got 50 children sitting on these rickety benches there who only speak German. And so she stands up there and sings songs to us. Now, you might remember this. My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. You remember that one?
Mhm.
Oh, I'm glad it's on somebody who remembers it.
Yes.
And you take the high road, and I'll take the low road, and I'll be in Scotland afore ye. Took me years to figure out what afore ye means. And we had no choice. We had to copy what she was doing. We thought it was crazy, but we did it. We had to. And we learned English very quickly. And we learned to read and write as well.
That's great.
Yes.
And then what prompted the move then? You had to flee again, basically, and then you went to Australia, your family. Or you and your husband went to Australia.
Well, that was much later, of course, yes, after the war, after the ghetto and everything else. We were in a Japanese ghetto during the war. The move was prompted by the fact that the government had changed from nationalist to communist, and the government at that point wanted all the foreigners out at that time. And so we had to leave, but we had no place to go to. It was very difficult again. We were stateless. We had no papers. My husband didn't have papers either. He was a refugee from Russia, from communist Russia. And so we found this lady in Australia who guaranteed for us. And we managed to get there a couple of weeks just before my oldest daughter, Jennifer, was born. Very, very difficult, very, very hard.
Before that, one of the things that I noticed in your book that impressed me was that you really were able to have an active life as a child, and before the Japanese came, and you had boyfriends and you had fun, and you
read the book. I can see
you had such a positive attitude, Betty, and so how were you able to keep that attitude? What was life really kind of normal from that standpoint for you?
Well, life was never normal, but it was a new normal. It was what it was. We just took it the way it was. And also the people who lived around us, the other refugees, we were all in the same boat.
Right.
It was not unusual for us to have problems, and other people had the same problems, and some people had more, some people had less, but you kind of went along with it. So 16 people in the ghetto during the ghetto years, in the Japanese ghetto years, used the same bathroom. But then there were other people who didn't have a bathroom. Okay, let's put it that way.
Right.
So even that was something we had and somebody else didn't have. Very strange. But we just kind of adapted every day. And I guess I was born an optimist. And I just went ahead, and I had my family around me. And that was the most important thing, as far as I'm concerned. I didn't understand it at the time. I didn't realize it till years and years later, that was my strength, was my family.
And your sister, you were so close to your sister.
I was close enough to her when we were kids. All children fight and all that. We became very close as we got older, we did. Yeah, and my mother and my father, my mother was always there for us. And even though she was very unhappy because, she had all these terrible memories of her parents not being there. And all. But my father always said, we'll get through this, we'll get through it, He was a very quiet, old style gentleman, but he was very strong, I realize now. I hope that I inherited some of that from him.
Mm-hmm. And when you and your husband lived in Australia for 3 years, what stands out for you in that time period?
Well, I had 2 children within 3 years. My first 2, Jennifer was born after 2 or 3 weeks when we got there, and everything was different. Everything was totally new. I was not used to the Australian way of life. They were much more reserved than we were in Shanghai, But I made some friends, and people were pretty good to us. We lived in the same house with my mother-in-law, who had come a few weeks after us, and my brother-in-law, which wasn't the greatest arrangement you could think of. But I was very young. I didn't understand a lot, But all my girlfriends who had also come to Australia from China, whom I had known in Shanghai, we were all in the same situation. So again, I had a circle of friends around me, and we would get together and we would complain about things and why did we have to live like this and so on and so forth. But it's such a beautiful country, It was so lovely out there. I mean, they had these wonderful beaches, and the people were pretty good to us, but we were known as New Australians, which set us apart again. We still didn't have papers, of course not. We put in for Australian citizenship, but we never got it because we left 3 years afterwards.
And when you moved to the United States, what state did you move to?
Well, we went to New Jersey because my sister, who had married an American soldier in Shanghai, lived in New Jersey. And my parents, who eventually, after many problems, got to America from Shanghai. So we all went to New Jersey to begin with, although our first year was spent in Springfield, Massachusetts, because my husband had a scholarship to Springfield College to finish his degree so he could teach. He was a teacher in Shanghai and in Australia and in America. So it was, what was the question? I'm falling apart here.
I forgot. No, the question was when you moved to you moved to New Jersey and you were reunited with family.
Well,
and
I hadn't seen my sister for 5 years. I hadn't seen my parents for 3 years. So again, I had family, you see, and that was one of the main reasons why we left Australia, because I wanted to be with my family. With Australia is, as I said, a wonderful place to live.
Had your parents? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Had your parents moved on before you and your husband followed?
They had come to America about a year or so before us. And they showed us around and everything else. It was they were already becoming Americans, we all wanted to become Americans, and that was the key to the whole thing. And it took several years, as we all know, and it's not easy to do that. But I'll tell you one thing, when you finally get your naturalization papers and your passport in your hand, you better hang on to it. It is the most important thing that you can have. If I travel anywhere, even if I don't go overseas, I always take my passport because that is my most important thing. And I wish that people would know, don't take anything for granted. If you have American citizenship, that's something to be proud of. That's the way I felt when I got here, and that's the way I always felt before that, and I still do today. And I tell my kids how lucky they are to live in this country.
Wow, yes.
So has that that identity as a refugee, did that leave you at some point?
Yeah, I think it probably did. Once I got my papers, that's a big deal. Now we have 2 members in our family that have just gotten their papers through marriage, and I know how they feel. It's a feeling that you belong somewhere, that there's someone who can be there for you when you're a refugee. And I was a refugee from the time I can remember. No one watches out for you. Something happens to you, it's just too bad. You'll have to dig out by yourself, which is what we always did. But it's not so easy, and now I can go if I wanted to, and I have done before. I can go to a different country, and if something happens to me, I can get to the American consulate.
Yes.
You don't have that in your background. You haven't got anything. So make sure you value your citizenship and value that we chose this country. But people who are born here might just take it for granted, and they shouldn't, because it's so important.
One of my good friends and also one of our earlier podcast guests, she and her mother had to flee from Romania to Israel, and then she migrated from Israel to the United States. But she really wrestles with that idea. What is home? What does home mean? And I hear you talking about if you're with your family, things could be okay. But what does home mean?
Home to me, of course, it means a place, A home meant to me when I was a little girl. Home meant the wonderful apartment we lived in Berlin, in Germany. And then home was Shanghai, not necessarily the wonderful apartment, because it wasn't a wonderful apartment, but I was with my family. And then when I came to Australia and then eventually to America, we had a beautiful home in New Jersey, and where my children grew up and all. And of course, that's home to them and was home to me. But I see now that I live in Florida, and I have a little condo, and I love it, absolutely love it over here. Home is not necessarily a place. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of belonging somewhere, of having family. If you're lucky enough to have family, you know, be nice to them and keep them around you if you can, you know, because that is really the real home there is your family, and to have them with you when you need them or they need you, you know. I think that's more a feeling than a place.
Wow.
And I mentioned in the introduction that you and Anna Maria speak weekly on Zoom. So you have
every Sunday morning.
Every Sunday morning.
Have you ever seen each other in person?
No, actually, we do it on WhatsApp. I mean, I'm not very technically minded here. I'm not very good at these things. So, but I know what to do with WhatsApp. So my kids taught me, because I'm not very good at this. And I call them up and I always say, what do I do now? You know, but no, she's up there with her morning coffee. We're now on the same time slot, and 10 o'clock. And I'm sitting here with my coffee, and we talk for about an hour. And we talk about our lives before and what we're doing now, because she was on the same path that I was. She wrote a book, and we never knew about each other. And the fact that we have such a similar story, you know, after we parted, it's just amazing. And we have the same taste in many things, and we complain about some of the same things. Oh, look at what the younger generation is doing now, you know, that kind of thing. But it's wonderful. I have someone I can talk to who knows who I am. I have wonderful, good friends also now, and I've had wonderful friends all my life. But this one is different. She was with me when I was little, and she remembers some of the things that I remember. And then we talk about the people that we knew and the places that we went to. It's just a magnificent situation, and we're so lucky that we found each other, that I can't even express in words how wonderful it is for both of us. And she came here in last November, and we had a meeting.
Oh, you did?
We finally had it, yeah, after we were supposed to have other meetings before that, but the epidemic and everything, it didn't happen. So she came with her son. He brought her here for 4 days, and we had this reunion, and it was like we were never apart. It's unbelievable. We're both so lucky that this happened to us. It just put a whole new lift to our life, you know. It lifted everything up and made us realize how precious time is, that we have to take the time to talk to each other. And to talk to our students and our audiences and tell them what happened in the old days, that we were the lucky ones who got through it. And that's very rare.
I think it's remarkable that each of you went on, you know, these different paths, and yet both of you have been for years speaking out about your experiences, having a very similar mission, I think. And that you come together after 82 years and you can relate to one another. And it's not just about the past, it's about how you're living your lives.
What we're doing now, yes. And we've actually done a Zoom meeting together. She did it out of Chile, and I did it from the museum here, the Holocaust Museum in Florida, in St. Petersburg. And they had us both on the screen at the same time telling our stories. And it's, you know, it's so satisfying. I can't think of anything aside from my feeling of gratitude that I've come this far that could be better than having her in my life again, you know.
It's such a gift too that you give to organizations and to us and to and that you're willing to speak about this to anyone that will listen practically, I think. And yeah, I mean, how did you find the strength to do that, Betty?
It was very difficult in the beginning, very hard, because I am not a public person. At least I never was before. And I wrote the book, and that's all very good and very nice. But then the people in the Holocaust Resource Center in New Jersey, where I was also, active. The lady there, Gail Rosenthal, who's executive director there, she said, "You come with me, and we're going to talk to our high school." I said, "I can do that. I've never done that in my life, My husband's the one who's always been giving speeches and doing things. He's the extrovert. I'm not, I can't do that." So anyway, we went. It was terrible.
It was terrible.
I mean, the first time, I don't know if this ever happened to any of you, but the first time you talk in public and you've never done it before, it is horrendous.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't work out too well for me, and especially not since, as I was walking towards the front of the class, this is high school. High school is not so easy to speak to. I like the fifth graders better because they're wide open and they're full of questions. Anyway, but I do talk to many high schools. So anyway, this one girl over there said to me, "I don't care about your Holocaust." Well, I turned around and made for the back door, but my friend who was with me said, no, we're going to do this. So it was difficult, as I say.
Yes.
You learn after a while,
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who was very involved in the fundraising for the U.S. Holocaust Museum.
Uh-huh.
And she worked there for many years and has been quite the, not necessarily her, but the woman that she worked for, who really was the Chicago arm of the U.S. Holocaust Museum. And another friend whose parents were in the Holocaust and who, I wonder if your children experience this. I have to ask you. She has a sister. My friend has a sister. And my friend, who is my age, no, she's more Catherine's age. She has joined groups and has been very willing to share her parents' story and to be out there. Her sister, on the other hand, wants nothing to do with that. She's younger, maybe 5 years younger. And so I just wonder if your children have reached out to help in any way to perpetuate this important story.
Without my children, I wouldn't be where I am today. I can tell you that. Mm-hmm. They have helped me in every which way. And the two of them that live in Florida here, Jennifer and Sandy, the two oldest ones, they have been with me and helped me, go to these talks and show me how to do things. And they're both very, they're first-class citizens, of course. They're very smart, both of them, as are all my other ones. They have all been most supportive. And they help me all the time. And as a matter of fact, I just did some time ago, I did an interview with what's it now? Where Jennifer interviews me, and we did it together. Mm-hmm. These kids could tell the story by themselves if they want to, Mm-hmm. Hope that someday they will carry on with it, so that the story will go on. But in the meantime, I've also done this thing with the Holocaust Museum here. What was it?
Do they have holograms?
Yeah, the hologram thing. Mm-hmm. I've done that. Mm-hmm. We just did that last fall. 5 days of filming for that.
Oh my.
It's very, very intense, very intense. There were 4 of us from this St. Petersburg area who did it. one after the other. The one of them is already on there. I'm going to not be on for a little while yet, but it's a real hologram. And then, they ask you questions and you answer the questions. It goes on for 5 days, and you have to wear the same thing every day and all that, because you have to look like you just got in there.
Mhm.
So I tell my kids that after I'm dead and gone, you can come to the museum and plug me in and ask me something and I'll talk to you, but I'm not really there anymore.
Wow.
Quite
An
a
image.
I mean, that's the kind of thing that's been going on, it's amazing.
It's a wonderful exhibit for people to come and see. And again, you're so courageous for sharing your story this way.
Well, it's not a matter of courage. It's something that I feel needs to be done.
Yes.
Because if you don't listen to history, there's a danger of it repeating itself, as we all know.
Yes.
We don't want what happened then in Germany and all these people who got lost and had to go to different countries and everything else. And if we don't talk about it, people will not remember. We write the books, and we make the documentaries and everything else. And we hope that the next generation picks up and goes on with it and takes lessons from it,
Mhm.
Should just be kind to one another. That's what it's all about,
Betty, you say toward the end of your memoir, so this was written in 1992, that you've come a long way since you lived in that one room with your family. And you said, sometimes I think I learned a lot along the journey, and sometimes I think quite the opposite. Do you still have questions? Do you still have trying to make meaning out of your experiences?
Still wonder sometimes, how come you're the one who got through? How come you're the one who came out, And then again, I think the other way. And I say, well, I was just very fortunate, that some of us got out, many of us got out, but not enough.
Mhm.
And again, I give credit to my parents, who never would have left Germany at all if it hadn't been for my sister and me, because their parents lived in Europe. All their siblings were there. Brothers, sisters, children, everything. But if you can't think like that, it's just very hard. And so I think about it sometimes that, I was just lucky to get through. And apparently there was a reason for me to get through.
Mm-hmm.
Not only the fact that my father worked very hard at it, but like I say, they never would have left their parents. When I was 9 years old, they were sending children out to England. 10,000 of them went to England on the Kindertraum.
Mm-hmm.
And children went to Palestine, which is today the state of Israel. My sister and I were supposed to go.
Mm.
My parents changed their mind in the last minute. And my mother said, I'll never see you again. And she was right.
Mhm.
Oh, no wonder she cried all the time. Oh, dear.
She cried a lot. I cried a lot when I was growing up too, but that was a little bit later when I was already, had 2 little kids and living in Australia and all that. I was very lonely then.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So, is there anything else you would like to say before we have to wrap up?
Just that being a refugee is very difficult, and that if we just show love and kindness to other people, and you don't get anywhere with hate. This is what happened to us: hate, anti-Semitism, anti-racial things that are going on even today, as we know, and all these things are going on. People are not as nice to each other as they should be. So let love come out more instead of hate. Like that man who gave us Cokes when we landed in America. I don't think it's in the book.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yes, it is in the book.
It is a good. Anyways, a kind deed that someone gave to us, in 1953.
Mhm.
I have never forgotten. Someone gave us a bottle of Coke when we landed in America and said, "Welcome to America." And I thought that was just the greatest thing ever. And I'm sure he forgot about it. And I tell that story all the time, and it still moves me, even though I don't like Coke, but I drank it.
Well, Betty, thank you so much. This has just been an incredibly special time for us, and I know our listeners will appreciate you greatly. And thank you for spreading the message about love and compassion for one another.
That's what we need. And thank you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. Thank you both very much.
Thank you so much.
Very welcome, Betty.
Thank you.